The 2025 season is just around the corner. That means kickoff time for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Helping us break down and preview this upcoming season, Wyatt Fulton of Tide 100.9, one of the best in the business when it comes to talking all things Crimson Tide. Wyatt, appreciate you taking the time, my friend. It was great to link up with you in Atlanta at SEC Media Days, and really excited to be chatting with you today ahead of a big-time 2025 season in Tuscaloosa.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me on. It was, like you said, it was fun to get to talk with you in Atlanta. So excited to chat for a little bit here.
Certainly, Wyatt. Again, we're going to look at this 2025 Crimson Tide team. Before we do, though, if you don't mind, I want to look back at 2024 and kind of just how we got to the point we're at right now, because a year ago to the date, we were talking about Kalen DeBoer, year one. What was that going to look like post Nick Saban? There were so many storylines going into the season, and you know, to call it a mixed bag, I think it was exactly that, right? You go 9-4 overall, 5-3 in SEC play. You lost to Michigan in that ReliaQuest Bowl. Your four losses all came on the road. Obviously, the ones that most notably losing at Vanderbilt, at Oklahoma late in the season, which essentially knocked you out of a college football playoff spot. Again, there were some highs. There was the game that I was at against Georgia where, you know, for a half, Alabama looked like they might be the best team in college football, and then second half rolls around, things go a little bit different, but you pull out the victory, obviously, over the Dogs. But when you look back at year one of the Kalen DeBoer era, Wyatt, you know, it obviously fell short of expectation because the expectations are so high in Tuscaloosa. But, like, what do you make of it? I feel like it's really hard to put a label or even a grade on what that year was.
Yeah, I definitely think it's tough to put an actual grade or, like you said, a label on the season. But I would say year one had a lot of ups and downs, like you mentioned. The first half against Georgia, you couldn't tell anybody in Tuscaloosa anything that first half against Georgia there. And then obviously, you know, the super high of the Georgia game, and then immediately hit what a lot of fans considered rock bottom at the time, losing to Vanderbilt in Nashville there. And then, of course, the couple of losses to Tennessee and then Oklahoma. So I look at it as a good building block for Kalen DeBoer, because 9-3 is not a bad record. Almost anywhere else in the country, 9-3 is going to get you maybe even a contract extension. But in Tuscaloosa, of course, we know it's playoffs or bust, it's championship or bust at Alabama, and so their fans are expecting a step up in the right direction here for 2025, and if this team can hit the ceiling, now granted, if everybody hits their ceiling, you know, we're talking about one of the greatest seasons of all time. But if this team can hit their ceiling, I think this will be a good year for Alabama.
Wyatt, we mentioned Kalen DeBoer coming into his second season now. Obviously, this was a hire that was celebrated when it happened, and for good reason. You look at the resume. Kalen DeBoer was just coming off of taking Washington to the national championship. Again, the resume speaks for itself. You know, I ask everyone this because I think, Wyatt, you've got as good a feel, if not a better feel, than anybody on the pulse of the Bama fan base and just the overall vibe around that program. So I ask you simply, what is the feeling and the vibe around Kalen DeBoer? Obviously, he's not on any sort of hot seat or anything, but we know about the competitive pressure that lies in Tuscaloosa, right? It's been a long time since we came into a season and Bama wasn't the lead storyline or the focal point, or we weren't asking the question, you know, it's Bama than everybody else. Who can beat Alabama? It feels like we've entered sort of this new era post Nick Saban. So I know there's some mixed feelings, but from what you feel, the temperature of the fan base, what's the overall vibe around Kalen DeBoer going into his second year?
The vibe is high on, I would say, is high on Kalen DeBoer right now, especially, you know, a lot of people think that first year replacing Nick Saban, you were in retention mode. And that was something that the staff has said a couple of times as well. You're in retention mode, right? Because obviously Nick Saban retires. Portal's open for 30 days. It is open season on your roster at that point. So you've got everybody in a huddle and you're trying to hold on to as many guys as you can at that point. And so I think this is more so what Kalen DeBoer wants for Alabama in year number two. The energy in the building's great. We've talked with Grubb, Womack, tons of players and coaches. I think we got 20 the other day that we were able to talk to. And so the vibe is high. The chemistry is there for this year's team. And you also look at getting Ryan Grubb back. That was a thing that we talked about a lot when it happened, but it's still just as important here in August as it was back in February when he got hired. Ryan Grubb is going to be the machine that makes this offense go. If this offense has success, the vast majority of it will be attributed to, I think, Ryan Grubb.
You mentioned Ryan Grubb, Wyatt. That being said, let's talk about this 2025 Crimson Tide football team. And I do want to start on the offensive side. Like you mentioned, it was a huge addition. Ryan Grubb is paired back up with Kalen DeBoer, sort of his right-hand man on the offensive side as his OC. It starts at the quarterback position. I think a lot of people, Wyatt, would agree quarterback is the pick to click for this football team, at least one of the key ingredients. Ty Simpson, Austin Mack, Keelan Russell all battling for that QB1 spot, although it seems Ty Simpson is the favorite. They've said multiple times that if they played a game tomorrow, it would be Ty Simpson. But again, we don't know. We don't know. 3 starters are back on the offensive line. Caden Proctor leading the way with that group of preseason All-American. Your wide receiver room, it's one of the best in the country. Ryan Williams obviously burst on the scene a season ago. He's back. Jeremy Bernard is back. You also added Isaiah Horton from Miami via the portal. So that's a loaded group. Jam Miller back at RB1. You also have Richard Young, who's providing depth to be a key piece for you. And then Josh Cuevas and Danny Lewis, manning the tight end spot. Wyatt, when you look at the offensive side of the football, just talk to me a little bit about what you're expecting. And I said quarterback is the pick to click. In your mind, is it really that simple, or is there more to it?
I think a lot of pressure is going to be put on whoever the quarterback ends up being. For all intents and purposes, everything that I've kind of read, heard, seen, talked with guys, it's probably going to be Ty Simpson. Like, I'm 95% certain they run out onto the field on August 30th against Florida State. Number 15 is going to be the first quarterback out there for Alabama. Now, how long is that going to be the case? Is he going to be on a tighter leash? I don't know. He's kind of the more veteran guy in that room, albeit he's got no career starts under his belt. But I do think quarterback is, like you said, the pick to click here. Ryan Grubb has hounded the point that we need somebody who's going to be more than a game manager, but we don't need somebody to be, a Caleb Williams, a Joe Burrow, a Bryce Young. We don't need that, but we need a little bit more than maybe an AJ McCarron, a Greg McElroy, not to put those two guys in the same stratosphere, but we need more than a game manager. And so I think Ty Simpson kind of fits that bill the best. He's taking care of the ball a lot here during fall camp, and he's just got more of a command of this offense. He and Ryan Grubb get along very well together. So at the quarterback spot, I think it's going to be Ty Simpson. And then at that point, you look at this first game of the season, right? You want to make his life as easy as possible, because Florida State they were 2-10 last year, so take it with a grain of salt, but they're a rowdy bunch. They're a group that is going to get out there and they're going to make your life hell if you're not careful. So make his life easy, be able to run the ball, establish the ground game is going to be a big key for Alabama in that first game of the season, just to get Ty's feet wet at that point. Now, once he's comfortable, I think you can maybe throw the ball all over the yard with him when you've got, Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard, Isaiah Horton. Don't forget Jalen Hale's healthy now. Cole Adams was Mr. Reliable for this unit last season before he got injured. Where does Jalen Mbakwe fit in all this? His transition from defensive back to wide receiver sounds like he's been doing some good things in camp here as well. So you've got to be able to make Ty Simpson's life easy. And I think having Ryan Grubb, Kalen DeBoer, Nick Sheridan still on the staff after being the OC last season, having so many veteran guys who have got play calling experience in that room around Ty Simpson is going to be huge for this offense.
Wyatt, going to the other side of the football, because that's the side that I think could be one of the best units in all of college football, that being the Crimson Tide defense. It starts up front in the front seven. Tim Keenan III, James Smith, LT Overton, a host of others leading the way up front. And by the way, you'll notice, and Bama fans already know this, but it's a bunch of guys that could have went to the NFL that all basically decided to come back. So you've got a lot of high-quality dudes that are going to be draft picks in next year's NFL draft. Deontay Lawson, Jamarian Latham, Quay Rusall, Justin Jefferson, they're all back at the linebacker spots. You've got Damani Jackson, Xavier Brown, Keon Sabb, Dijon Lee Jr., et cetera, all back in the secondary. And it is year 2 of Kane Womack. We talk so much, Wyatt, about, year 1 to year 2 for the head coach, for the offensive side and scheme. How about the defense and what Kane Womack should be able to do? Again, this should be one of the SEC's best units. I'm sure you were as befuddled as I was at SEC Media Days. I don't believe there was a single Bama defensive back that made the first team preseason All-SEC team, which, again, just goes to show you that you have to take it with a grain of salt. So, anyways, I ask you, expectations for this defense, I would imagine they are sky high going into the year.
Absolutely. Yeah, when we were in Atlanta, this was the first time since they started doing the preseason All-SEC team that an Alabama defender did not make the first team, which is for a unit that was top 10 last season.
How do you explain that, Wyatt? How do you?
Had me blown away. I was like, wait a minute, they're returning 8 starters on the defensive side of the football. The defensive coordinator's back. You only made 1 change in the coaching staff on the defensive side of the ball. This was a ball hawking unit, a unit that was Kane Womack's big philosophy is driving to the football, getting so many guys to the football, and then being able to force those turnovers, right? We've played ball before, right? You're the first guy there. Your job is to stop him and wrap him up. And then everyone who's coming in after that is punching at that ball. So that's what Kane Womack's kind of been enforcing with this defensive unit. And you look at this defense, they're returning 8 or 9 starters, depending on how you look at it, with Keon Sabb versus Bray Hubbard from a season ago. This was a really good unit. This was the first top 10 defense Alabama's had since Jeremy Pruitt was the defensive coordinator. And they've won a national title since that point. So I look at this defensive unit. I expect this to be another top 10 unit in the SEC. I think the secondary has a chance to be the best in the country, with Damani Jackson, Xavier Brown's in year number 2. Keon Sabb is back healthy after his foot injury against Tennessee. The defense seemed to get better when Bray Hubbard entered the lineup last year. Well, now he's a full-time starter. So theoretically, the defense should be really freaking good this upcoming season as well. And then on the front 4 there as well, Tim Keenan, he's your big body, right? He's the guy that if I'm getting into a street fight, I'm picking Tim Keenan to be on my side at that point. James Smith as well. He looks like he's going to be the guy to replace Tim Smith, who went on to the NFL. He's got such a high motor. And I was talking with somebody the other day. He reminds me a lot of Quinnen Williams and what Quinnen Williams was able to do during his big season here in Tuscaloosa. Of course, Alabama went on to win the SEC championship that season. So, and then you look at the edge rusher position, Quay Russaw, you got to get him a little bit more production in the pass rush there. On 3rd down last season, Quay Russaw came off the field. Q Robinson came onto the field. Great veteran guy, but he's not in that room anymore. So you need Quay Russaw to take that next step there as a defensive leader, as kind of the pass rush guy in that Wolf linebacker room. And then at Bandit, you need LT Overton to complete some of these sacks, some of these big plays. He's that close to making them, but then somebody, makes a step one way or another, or LT just can't quite get his hands on him, and it ends up going from a 5-yard loss for a tackle for loss or a sack to a 15-yard play. And you're thinking, man, if LT was just a half a step faster, that's probably a really good play for Alabama. So those are the keys you're kind of trying to look at there. And then in that linebacker room, Justin Jefferson is an absolute missile. He's one of the fastest runners on this team as a linebacker. Deontay Lawson's back as another veteran guy from his leadership role last year, only returning captain from 2024. And then Nikai Hill-Green has his days at Murado last season. So veteran experience is definitely not something this defense is lacking.
Wyatt, I want to move to special teams. I know it's a facet of the game that's often overlooked, but certainly if we look back over the last 10, 15 years, the history of Alabama football, special teams has played a part one way or another, good or bad. But
yeah.
You look at this year's group, Connor Talty taking over at the kicker spot, Blake Dowd, which Wyatt, I got to be honest, I didn't know the Colorado School of Mines existed until I was doing my research on this. But Blake Dowd, that is where he comes from, and he will take over the punting duties. You've got options in the return game, Ryan Williams, Cole Adams, there are others available. Just thoughts on the special teams unit this season. What are you expecting from that group? Do you expect it to be, quote unquote, special this year?
I expect it to be good. Colorado School of the Mine. Yeah, like you, I didn't know that school existed until I got the notification. The punter is committed to Alabama. Where's he from? Colorado School of the Mines. All right, cool. New punter for Alabama. All right. Hopefully he was not getting some stat boost because of that elevation. Hopefully he can kind of keep that going here in Tuscaloosa. But I expect the punting game, anytime you lose a guy like James Burnham, it's going to be a loss. You're going to take a step back. I said the same thing about the offensive line on my show earlier this week. Anytime you lose a guy who is that experienced, I was mentioning the offensive line and losing a guy like Tyler Booker. I don't care how good Cam Dewberry or Geno Vandemark are going to be. You're going to take a step back at left guard. Same thing with the punting position, losing a guy like James Burnham. But I expect that unit to be good. Connor Talty was handling kickoffs for Alabama last season, while Graham Nicholson did extra points and field goals. So Talty's at least got some reps in there, right? He handled all the kickoffs. So he was under the lights in Bryant-Denny when that crowd was rowdy and Alabama's up 30-7 on Georgia at halftime. He understood what it was like kicking off with a rowdy environment in that type of crowd. So I expect him to be good. Obviously, you can't simulate field goals with kickoffs, but I expect him to be a little bit better than maybe Graham Nicholson was last year. I think Nicholson only attempted 10 field goals and he missed his first 2. So kind of shot his confidence early in the year. And then the return game, the biggest thing in the return game for me this upcoming season is making sure you do not have a penalty on punt units, right? You could argue a penalty on a punt unit cost Alabama a win last season because Alabama got a stop against Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's punting the ball, and then Ryan Williams and Xavier Brown, who both were number 2, are out on the field at the same time. Penalty, Vanderbilt converts a first down, and I think they ended up scoring on that drive. So biggest thing is discipline and the attention to detail when you come to special teams. And if you put your best guy back there like a Ryan Williams, you need to be prepared for somebody to maybe headhunt a little bit. Maybe they're trying to, hey, if Ryan's going to be returning punts, maybe we can take him off the field as a wide receiver at this point. So I look in the return game for a guy like a Jalen Mbakwe to kind of cement himself as a role player on this unit. Cole Adams handled those duties before he got injured last season against Missouri for the rest of the year. So I look for a guy like Cole Adams to maybe be the punt returner. Jalen Mbakwe, Cole Adams maybe handling kickoff duties. I could see Dre Washington working his way up into that role as well. He's kind of the 4th running back, but he brings a speed element that we haven't seen at Alabama from the running back room since like a Jahmyr Gibbs was here in Tuscaloosa. I'm not saying he's that fast, but he brings a next level of speed that you haven't seen from that room since Jahmyr was in there. So those are the guys that I look at on special teams units.
So, Wyatt, as we take a look at this football team, a stat that doesn't matter quite as much as it used to, but is worth noting, 13 starters are back. And again, I say it doesn't matter as much because the transfer portal era and that returning experience number kind of skewed. But again, 13 starters from last year are back, 6 on offense, 7 on defense. A lot of guys on the defensive side back. Wyatt, I want to zero in on the schedule because as you and I both know, as we all know, not all schedules are created equally in the SEC. Alabama's really interesting. Like you mentioned, you open up that season opener at Florida State, which, it's one of the top games of week 1. But like you said, they went 2-10 last year, but everybody's 0-0 now. So who knows? You're at FSU. You get ULM in the non-conference. You get Wisconsin coming to Tuscaloosa after going there last year in week 3. Then you have the bye week. Then it gets real fast. You open SEC play at Georgia, the rematch of the showdown from last year that, again, we were at, very well maybe at again, wink, wink. You get Vandy the following week at home, which I imagine is going to be quite an opportunity for revenge, we'll say it, for the Crimson Tide. Road dates include, looking down the schedule, at Mizzou, at South Carolina, and at Auburn in the Iron Bowl to close out the season. Notable home games. You will get a shot at revenge against Tennessee. You get LSU, obviously, at home coming off a bye, your first game in the week of November, and another shot at revenge against Oklahoma in the middle of November, which is actually your homecoming game. You mix in a non-conference game as well with Eastern Illinois late. So, Wyatt, I simply ask you, when you look at this schedule, major takeaways for you? Do you feel like this is a schedule conducive to having a big year for the Crimson Tide?
I think it absolutely can be. Kalen DeBoer is undefeated off of bye weeks in his career, I believe. So obviously getting Georgia right then and there, you saw what Alabama did with that extra week of preparation last season, right? So getting Georgia after the bye week is a big deal. Getting LSU after that bye week again. I thought the two best games Alabama looked in last year was the first half against Georgia and that game against LSU. What happened in those two games? They were both coming off of byes. So getting those two games are really big in those environments there. I see a couple of maybe trap environments here when you look at this upcoming schedule. I look at Missouri, number 1. That is an 11 a.m. kick. Chris, if you've ever been to an 11 a.m. game, it's hard to get up for those things. It's hard to wake up for those games. So, and it's sandwiched right in between the big game against Georgia, the revenge game against Vanderbilt, skip Missouri, revenge game against Tennessee, and then what could be, I think, a dark horse candidate for game of the year against South Carolina late in October. Missouri on the road at 11 a.m. is sandwiched right in the middle of all that. So you got to be disciplined. You got to take care, again, attention to detail, do everything you need to do on the road, or you could fall for a trap. You could fall for a trap game there against Missouri. And then home games, I don't think Alabama loses a home game this season. I think they go undefeated at home this upcoming year. But if they do lose one, to me, it would be that Oklahoma game with John Mateer, Deion Burks, and all those guys coming in. Alabama, of course, coming off the rivalry game with LSU. That game is notorious for being just an absolute barn burner physical matchup. Like, guys are on Like, guys are on crutches during practice for the next week, trying to rehab from that LSU game. You get the easy week the next week. And then if you are, 1 loss, 2 loss going into the Iron Bowl, that could potentially decide your season on the Plains down in Jordan-Hare Stadium. So, but I look at the schedule and I think it's conducive of Alabama having a special year if this team kind of turns into what it's looking like they are.
Wyatt, as we take a look just at the overall outlook in this season, this team as a whole, I want to ask you this because I've got a lot of Alabama buddies, some of them you and I are mutually friends with, that I talk to. And like we said earlier, Kalen DeBoer, you're not going to see him on any hot seat lists or any conversations like that. But it's funny, again, I talk with them and there's a lot of confidence, but there's also he better win. Like it better, we better get to the playoff this year. So I want to ask you this. There's a lot of confidence, but like how much pressure, and it's competitive pressure. I don't think it's a bad thing at all, but realistically, how much pressure is there on Kalen DeBoer to get this team to the playoff? Because, I'm not saying it's national title or bust, but if they don't make the college football playoff in back-to-back seasons, we're going to be having a much different conversation this time next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a team that's going to make the college football playoff, but there's a lot of pressure to do it because, number one, the 4-team era was so tough to make the playoffs in. Now it's kind of gotten watered down with the 12-team era. SMU and Indiana made it last year. Like, come on. Like 9-3 Alabama was one spot away from making the college football playoff. You watch that Michigan game back and tell me that was a team deserving of a playoff bid. I was sitting in Tampa. That was not a playoff team sitting in Tampa, Florida.
I was there as well, Wyatt.
Yeah, that was not a playoff team sitting in Tampa that day. So, but no, there's a lot of pressure to make the playoffs. I think with the modern era of college athletics, the conversation has shifted from championship or bust to playoffs or bust, especially in a place like Tuscaloosa. I think Alabama fans are going to be heated. They're going to be disappointed if this is a roster that doesn't win the SEC and then loses in the first round of the college football playoff, or if this is a roster that wins the SEC. Because if you're winning the SEC, you're talking about this being a top 4 team in the country, like playoff or championship aspirations at that point. And then if you go out and lose in the quarterfinals, is that a disappointing season? In my eyes, it's not. Anytime you get to win a championship, whether that be SEC, national, whatever it may be, that's a successful season. But I think in the eyes of fans who grew up and understood Nick Saban and watched him build this monster in Tuscaloosa, if you didn't win a championship, that was considered a failure of a year. And Nick would tell you that. So with those expectations, I think those are unrealistic. But I do think this is a roster that has a lot of pressure on it, but they're embracing that pressure, right? This is a roster that they say, look, we understand we didn't do what we wanted to do last year. We did not have the success we wanted last season. That's why you saw guys like Tim Keenan, Deontay Lawson, Damani Jackson, on the offensive side of the ball, Parker Brailsford, Jam Miller, Jeremy Bernard. That's why they came back, was because they know that was not what Alabama typically is. And so a lot of pressure on them. They're embracing the pressure. And I think they ultimately do make the playoffs.
Wyatt, not asking you to make a prediction, but I want to know your take. The ceiling of this team. Can this team win a national championship?
It goes back to what you said at the very start of this, the quarterback position. If that quarterback position can be what we think it can be, at least those of us who have been in Tuscaloosa, seen these 5 or 6 open practices we've been able to see so far, they can. That can be a championship team. If the quarterback starts to struggle, if you see, let's say for fun, let's say Alabama's, 3 loss by the time we get into the month of November. Number one, that's a big conversation around Kalen DeBoer. But number two, for me, at that point, I'm saying, okay, this is clearly not worked out. Let's throw one of these young kids in here and see what they can do. Maybe get a Keelan Russell in there and kind of just get his feet wet, right? Get him understanding the college game and understanding what's happening. And then 26 is the year. But I do think this is a team that can absolutely win a national title this year. It's just all going to come down to what happens at that quarterback position, assuming it is Ty Simpson.
Like we said at the start, quarterback, the pick to click in T-Town, and there are a lot of expectations. It's going to be a fun year, Wyatt. Again, I appreciate you taking the time. Really excited to get down to Tuscaloosa hang out with you. Again, my friend, I appreciate you. Wyatt Fulton, a top 100.9. In case folks have been living under a rock, Wyatt, let them know where they can check out all of your great work and tune into you on the daily.
Absolutely. I host a show, T-Town Sports Daily, from 1 to 2 o'clock Central Time every weekday. You can download the Tide 100.9 app and listen anywhere you are. You could be in Columbus, Ohio, week 1, but you want to go listen to what I had to say about the game? Check out Tide 100.9 in the app right there. I also have an X account at FultonW_. I post all of my articles, all of my interviews, all of my video clips from practice over there as well.
Wyatt, you're the man. I appreciate you taking the time. Let's definitely do it again soon.
Absolutely, Chris. Appreciate you, man.